everybody, it's Leslie at the North Carolina Zoo, your school programs coordinator. Thanks for joining us today for our visit to the desert habitat. It's our Zoo EDventures. We're super excited to get you in, seeing some of the neat habitats that we have around here, learning a little bit more while you all, unfortunately, are stuck at home. So we are here in our desert habitat today, and we are going to be learning all about hot deserts. So not cold deserts. Your Antarctica is your biggest desert in the world. It's a cold desert. We're going to learn all about adaptations of animals that live in hot deserts. Now you may have heard, there it is, thank you. Right on cue, right? You may have heard a very loud bird call. It's really hard to miss when you come into the desert habitat. That is our white-headed buffalo weaver. They have very, very loud calls, and they've been kind of calling to each other. So if you hear that in the background, that's the white-headed buffalo weaver. We also have like some other birds around here. So you may hear them as well, but definitely none as loud as those weaver birds. So we are right here at our Komodo dragon habitat. At this stage, they are still arboreal, so it's way up there. They are, like I said, arboreal at this point in time in their lives. And so when you come in, when we open back up, and if you come back here, you have to look straight up, usually when you're looking for those Komodo dragons. We are going to be having people answering your questions during this program, so feel free to put anything that you want to know about our desert habitat into that chat box. So come with me, we're going to go to our first stop to learn about some really neat adaptations that hot desert animals have. Most of the time, they have to be able to deal with such hot temperatures. And one of the ways that animals can do that is by just getting out of the heat. So they will burrow or dig and live underground, including our first stop, which are the burrowing owls. Our burrowing owls, now I know when we think of owls usually, we think of really big birds up in trees, coming out at night, but burrowing owls, they are around during the day, and they spend a lot of time underneath in their burrows, and they're kind of a small little owl. If you see right there, our burrowing owl is kind of hanging out by what looks like driftwood. That driftwood underneath is a tunnel that our keepers made. So that owl can go down into the tunnel, and then back over here, you can see kind of a bigger piece of driftwood, and there is a door underneath it. That door is where the keepers can open up, and then they can go and clean in there. And that's where their nest is as well. Very interesting. Underground, literally burrow, just like their name says. Now also in this habitat, we have a roadrunner. Now, I love the roadrunner. If anybody has come in and seen the roadrunner, they are super fun. They're not as big as like most people think. I mean, I'm only like 5 feet, but a lot of times people think they're like really big, especially when you think of like the roadrunner and the coyote cartoons. But they're not super big. They're pretty small. They're about like this tall. And one of the neatest things about them is how they flirt with the ladies. So it is mating season right now in the desert, so you will probably hear birds more often because of that, because they're calling to each other. But the roadrunner, it will literally come up. It was running around. There it is, way back in the back, running around. See how it has its tail up? It has its tail up, and they actually will come sometimes up to the window right here, and they'll start to kind of push their tail up and down. And you can even see it a little bit. It's kind of pushing its tail up and down a little bit right now. And it even has kind of like a crest on the top of its head that it will push up those feathers as well. But one of the neatest things that they do that I learned from keepers is that the roadrunner will sometimes come up and bring food and present food to the keepers, and then he'll do kind of like a little dance and fan his tail out. Just because you all need it, I will kind of do that. I will now demonstrate this dance to you. You ready? Everybody ready? So when at home, what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to do this dance as well, because it is super fun. So they have their tail, and you saw they're kind of like pushing their tail down, up and down. And then they flare out their tails, and then they kind of dance up and down, just like this. When they waggle, just like this. And that is how to flirt with the other roadrunner ladies. And like I was saying with them too, he presents his food to the keeper. So sometimes he'll do that dance to the keepers as well, and it's super fun to watch. But it is a neat kind of courtship that those roadrunners have. So living underground is one pretty big adaptation to living in a hot desert. Another one is going to be right behind me. The animals that we have in here, we have lizards, we have uromastyx, but the one that I really want to draw attention to is the pancake tortoise, which is underneath kind of that tree. One thing that's really cool about our habitats here at the North Carolina Zoo is that a lot of what you see in them have been made by our design team and our exhibits team, and that what looks like a dead tree is actually also a basking light for the animals. So you can see how it gets kind of bright underneath there. That's that heat lamp or that basking lamp for them. But take a look at that tortoise. That is called a pancake tortoise. I'm sure everybody can guess why they're called pancake tortoises, right? They're super flat. Now I have a box turtle shell. When we think of turtles and tortoises, we usually think of a dome-shaped. And usually with tortoises too, a lot of them have a really dome-shaped as well. This dome-shaped works super well for turtles that were found around here, but for turtles and tortoises, or tortoises that live in the desert, it doesn't make as much sense to them because there's not kind of like big trees for them to be able to hide under. They have to be more flat and thin to be able to hide under small little rocks. So with the pancake tortoises, being that nice flat shape, it's almost like all of this wouldn't even exist, right? Being that nice flat shape allows them to be able to hide under little tiny crevices in rocks to be able to escape from the sun. Oh look, one of the pancake tortoises is coming out to see us. You can really tell now that flat shape by it coming closer. Over here. One really neat other adaptation that these tortoises have, and desert tortoises have, is they're able to hold water for a really long time. They can even get as much water as they can out of their urine, and so they don't go to the bathroom as much as, say, people do, or animals that don't live in the desert. And that is a really cool adaptation to allow them to kind of keep as much water in their body as possible. Because, like I said, deserts doesn't rain very often, so they need to be able to get water wherever they can. And one of the places that they get water is from their food. So right here, we have a nice big food bowl. And in that, I bet you can see some, anybody here like salads? That looks like a pretty delicious salad from me. It's got some lettuce, looks like some carrots. Ooh, it might be hard to see, but I see some peas and what looks like maybe some apples or grapes. But one thing on there that is a little bit different than my salads is kind of that white stuff that's on it. I guess maybe if I put some Parmesan cheese on my salad. But that is calcium. So we're able to give them a little bit extra calcium by dusting kind of, it's called like Reptical, dusting it on top of their food so that they're able to get all of the nutrients that they need. So that's what that kind of like white dusty stuff looks like on the salad. And you can even see this uromastyx right there, the one with the more spiky tail. That is an ornate uromastyx. I started to put the U and the O in separate spots. Anybody else do that? You can really see how flat that lizard is. And like we were saying with the pancake tortoises, that allows them to slip into tiny little crevices and rocks to hide from the really hot sun. So we're also, our next adaptation, or just kind of a really cool story about the zoo here, is gonna be back over here. We were talking about the white-headed buffalo weaver birds, and they're really neat. And one of the reasons that they're called weaver birds is they weave, which, you know, seems really interesting for a bird. Don't always think about that. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but way up there behind this really kind of tall, what looks like old tree, but it's actually the insides of a cactus. So way up there and way back in the back, so against the back wall, is where usually the white-headed buffalo weaver birds build their nest. They build such a big nest that we had to actually take one down because it was on top of a habitat and it wasn't able to, it was kind of covering up so much of the space. So when the season ended, we had to take one of them down so they could build a new one in a different location. This is just, oh gosh, this is even less than half of it. So to make it fit into a big box, we had to cut it in half. You can see it's pretty amazing. And there's even some like, it looks like some, not feathers, but kind of like dust bunnies in there almost. But a lot of this weaving material that they were able to weave together. And it also has a lot of sticks on it too. One thing that was really cool is when we were getting ready for this, we had it set up there, and then the two weavers came down and they started being like, ooh, what's that? That looks familiar. I don't know what that is. And they would come and like get close to it and like look at it and then get closer. And then they started to kind of take some of the stuff off of the nest and then take it to their nest right now that's up there. So it was really cool to watch. I'd never seen the weavers that close. So all of us like had our cameras out and we're like videoing. It was really cool. They're also beautiful birds. They have this beautiful kind of like white and then yellow on them. And they're pretty large birds, so you know, about that big. But I did see something cool over here, which we wanted to show you. We were talking about those delicious salads that the reptiles get. And we have a cool little reptile over here. That is called a chuckwalla, which I think is a super fun name for a reptile, chuckwalla. And over here, it looks like there's like maybe some mango in there too, but he was just eating. So like we were saying, that adaptation of getting all of that water from the food that you eat, because there's not a lot of water anywhere else. It's pretty neat. So our next adaptation to hot deserts I wanted to talk to you about is all the way over there. So come on and follow me. I'm sure you'll notice as we're kind of like walking around these huge cactuses. And there's so many different types of cactuses, but we kind of call all of those succulents. And they get the name succulent because they suck up water, basically. We were talking about how there's not a lot of precipitation in hot deserts or deserts at all. So the plants of the desert are a little bit different. And we did a really cool Facebook Live all about plants of the desert that you'll definitely have to check out with one of our horticulturalists. But to kind of like go a little bit into it right now, we have all of these different succulents that are able to kind of get all the water that they can. And they're made pretty neat. Well, now when I thought of succulents, I thought of them as just kind of being like a giant sponge, right? But they do still have kind of a woody interior. So some of the woody kind of trees that look like trees in here, that is the just woody interior of a cactus. And you can kind of see that one right back there. That is that woody interior of the cactus. And this takes a really long time to grow. They're very, very slow growing, but they have that woody interior that kind of gives them structure. And then, this is pretty neat. I call this a cactus cookie. Some people have heard of tree cookies before. So here's your woody interior, right here. And then this is all sponge, basically, spongy material. Right now it's dried up, so that's why it doesn't have kind of like that spongy feeling. But it's able to hold all of that water in there, anything. Now, one of the other really cool things about them is that their root system, so when we think of like the plants around here, you think of roots that go straight down, right? Well, for cactuses, their roots go out. since it doesn't rain so much, they need to be able to get as much rain from the top as possible. So if their roots were to go down, they wouldn't be able to reach all that rain. It would just be kind of like whatever was near the top. But if their roots go out, then there's all of that surface area for the cactus to be able to get as much water in their roots as possible. Now, another really neat thing I wanted to show you is this is what we call a rib. And this is also that kind of woody interior of a cactus. But you can kind of see it even looks like, if we think about our ribs, they protect us, they go around and they protect. And so, you know, I mean, yeah, rib system, right? Yeah, that makes sense. That's our ribs. So ribs of a cactus to help create that structure as well. Because they get so tall, they still have to be able to have something support them like a skeleton. What else they do is they have all of these little folds. I gotta be really careful. Don't wanna poke myself. They have all these little folds, as you can see. And if it were to, kind of like an accordion, how it can pull out, it can kind of get bigger and smaller. If it were to suddenly suck up a bunch of water, then this part right here would come out further. So it would be not as deep. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, so it can kind of like accordion go in and out and in and out, which is really a really neat adaptation to not being able to have a ton of water. So one other thing that happens with cactuses is there's a lot of animals that live in cactuses. We were talking about how the burrowing owl, it will dig down into the soil to be able to get a place to hide. Well, a lot of other birds that don't dig down in the soil or the sand will actually dig into the cactuses. And I didn't know this before I started working here, and it's one of the coolest things I think that I've learned is that the cactus, it's a living thing, right? It's a plant. So the cactus, when an animal starts to kind of dig into it and to create a home, it protects itself and creates a scar. So this is called a fairy boot, which is also a fun little name. This is kind of what that scar looks like inside of the cactus. And the bird would live in here. So the cactus is protecting the rest of it by kind of creating that scar and not allowing all of the water to have to go over there since it doesn't need it over there anymore. But yeah, it creates this very cool kind of like hard structure inside called the fairy boot. The fairy boot. It's pretty neat. All right, so our next adaptation to this habitat, did it again, is one of my favorite things to talk about. I love kind of like the kooky critters or like the weird critters of the world. They have my heart and soul, probably because I find myself to be a weird critter. But one of the cool things in here is this giant vinegaroon, which is in here. A lot of people think of arachnids as only spiders. Scorpions are arachnids, ticks are arachnids, mites are arachnids, not just spiders. And one of my favorite arachnids is this one, the vinegaroon. Now I'm sure you're probably sitting there saying like, vinegaroon? Like why is it called a vinegaroon? And one of their really neat adaptations is, I don't know if you can see it, but right behind it, where we usually think of a scorpion's tail, is kind of this long, thin part. And that can be flipped, and it will actually spray vinegar out. And that is a defense mechanism they have. So even though they're related to scorpions, they don't have that stinger on the end. They flick vinegar, basically. And it smells really good, because I love vinegar, so I love the smell of it. But it is a really neat defense mechanism that they have. And they're completely harmless. I've worked with them before in my hand, and they are just kind of like our tarantulas, where they just kind of hang out and walk around a little bit. But they definitely do look pretty creepy, right? So just like the vinegaroon, spiders also are invertebrates, so they don't have a backbone like we have. Our nice backbone. right there in our bodies. They instead have exoskeletons, or skeletons basically on the outside of their body. But if you think about it, if you had to wear the same shirt your whole entire life, that'd be pretty constricting. You'd grow out of it eventually. And you can't, you know, grow as big as you would need to if you had the shirt from when you were a baby. So they will shed their exoskeleton, just like we get bigger clothes as we get older. And it leaves this kind of perfect replica, which is really neat. And this is from a tarantula. So because it's from a tarantula, if I turn it over, you can see those right there. Fangs. Tarantulas are venomous. The vinegaroon is not venomous. The vinegaroon uses that vinegar to defend itself. And most tarantulas, especially ones over in South America and North America, they have what we call urticating hairs, which is a really fun word to say, urticating. And those hairs, they can flick, and then they kind of make whatever's eating it itchy. So if you look all throughout, you can see these hairs, and you don't see it on the abdomen as much, but that's where they get those urticating hairs, is from their abdomen. But if you're still messing with a spider, or if it needs to eat, they can use those fangs, and then they have venom that they're able to push out through it. I'm sure you've heard us here at the North Carolina Zoo talk about the difference between venomous and poisonous all the time. That is something that we talk about a lot. So venom, injection, fangs, stinger, bees, venomous. Poison, you have to eat or lick it. Don't go around licking animals, everybody. That's always my first thing that I go to. Just don't go around licking animals. And you ingest it, and then it makes you sick. So poison arrow frogs or poison dart frogs, they actually, their whole body is poisonous. They secrete a poison because of an ant that they eat. And spiders, they are venomous. They have those fangs that they use to inject venom. But the really neat thing, and why I feel super comfortable handling our tarantulas, is that they aren't very toxic. So they have that venom, but it's not very strong. And as long as you're not allergic to it, you're pretty good. It's gonna feel more like a bee sting. Not fun, but not gonna hurt you. We have one more friend that we're gonna meet over here in in this area. So come along with me real quick. See if we can find any animals in here. We do still have those nice food bowls out. And I do see one lizard. Looks like it's resting over there. But one thing, since it is resting, one thing I did want to point out is this nice sign that we have right here. It says, yes, they are alive. We get this question all the time. So a lot of the animals that are in here, they do lay out in the sun to get some warmth, or they'll hide, and they do tend to kind of not move too much. And if you think about the desert, if it's really hot all the time, they need to stay where it's not too hot and not too cold. So a lot of these animals kind of hang out in one place, and we get the question all the time, are they alive? They sure are. They're just taking a nice rest, soaking up all the sun that they can, and then if they get too hot, they can move into a new area. So all of these really neat adaptations that these animals have that allow them to survive in hot deserts, we can learn right here in our desert habitat. Things like living underground, like the burrowing owls, not going to the bathroom as often, like desert tortoises, having a super nice flat shape like the lizards and the pancake tortoise to hide in those little crevices, and even just coming out at night instead. We hope to bring you some kind of more cool information about maybe some nocturnal animals in the future. We hope you come back and learn some more cool stuff at our Zoo EDventures. They're every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 o'clock. Join us again next time. We'll see you then, everybody. Have a great day.